All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2020 MCTV Tech and Treats. My name is John Grabowski. I'm the Executive Director here at MCTV. For those that are watching this later on, this is going to be our Tech and Treats on Photoshop, done by our Content Manager, Sean Leary. We record all our Tech and Treats. So if you can't make them in person, you can watch them afterwards, and feel free to give us a call or stop on by if you have a question you want to learn more about anything that's done in Tech and Treats. If not this one, then one we've done previously. So with further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sean Leary to take over and talk about Photoshop. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. So take it away, Sean.
Okay. Hello, everybody. And thank you, Aiden, for being here for the live broadcast here. I'm just going to go over today generally what Photoshop is and what you can do with it. It's an extremely powerful tool. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at here. Okay, and so you should be able to see now Photoshop as I have it on my computer here. Okay, so Photoshop is a tool used to edit images, create images, basically anything you can think of with still images. You can do, create, edit, whatever you want with Photoshop. With that said, there's a distinction between it and its cousin, Illustrator, in that Photoshop is designed for editing raster images, whereas Illustrator is more for vector images. And you might be asking, what's the difference between raster and vector? So a raster image is, it has a specific amount of pixels used to create the image, whereas a vector image is, so say you make a circle with within Illustrator, it will use math to determine the exact size and shape of that, whatever you're making, to infinitely scale. So you could scale it up and as big or as small as you want without losing any quality. Whereas a raster image, if you blow it up too much, you're going to start losing quality. It's going to look bad. It's going to start looking pixelated because it's defined by the amount of pixels that are in it. Oh, it's not letting me. Oh, I see. Okay. So first, I'm going to kind of go over some of the tools and the workspace that you have here. Over here, you have layers. And in Photoshop, everything is built in layers. You don't want to do things all on the same layer because then you're going to do what's called a destructive edit, which I'll get into later as we kind of learn more about the tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new layer, and I'm going to show you a tool called the brush tool to start. The brush tool is right here. And as you can see, it's a paintbrush. And it does exactly what it seems like it does. So I'm going to make that a little bigger so that we can see. And I'm going to paint there. Normally, when you start the brush tool, it'll be at 100%, whatever size you want. 100% hardness, 100% opacity, and then whatever size you like here. You can change your brush settings up here. And the default colors for that, you can see right here, black and white, white being the secondary color. And you can switch between those with this button here. Now the brush tool is very, very powerful in that you can also use a number of different types of brushes. So it doesn't have to just be a circle like you see here. You can go into brushes here and general brushes. And as you can see, there are different shaped brushes here. So let's see, hard round pressure size. That one's normal. Let's see. There are some that look like pencil or charcoal, as you see here. A pastel color. That one's pretty similar, and it gives it a texture. And what it does, the brush tool, is the shape you see here. What it does is it just replicates that shape over and over and over again. And you can change how much of a percent it will use to do that spacing. So as I increase the amount of space between each one, you see it's going to start creating completely separate shapes here. And I'm going to make that a little smaller so it's a little easier to see. So you don't really want to paint with that. I'll create a new layer so that we can see better. Unless you're going for something like this, you don't really want to do that. Usually I'd have it around 8 to 10%, and you'll get nice smooth brush strokes. Now, of course, you have the brush stroke, the brush tool. You're also going to want to use an eraser tool. And the eraser tool is exactly what it sounds like, just like the brush. It's the counterpart to the brush. It erases, and it will just get rid of everything that you tell it to. And similarly to the brush, it has the same settings. It's basically the brush, but takes away instead of creates. And you can change how much you erase. Let's say you just want to erase just a little bit of it, but you still want to see it. You can change the opacity. You can just erase some of it. Turn that back up to 100%. Okay. And I can just erase all this if I want to. I can make it really, really, really big and just erase it all at the same time. Okay. Now, to go back to layers real quick. Say I draw a whole bunch of stuff right here, and I want to maybe try drawing, say, a smiley face. And I don't want to get rid of the layer I just drew with, but I want to be able to only see the new layer that I'm drawing with. What you can do is you can click on this eyeball here, and that will hide it. So I can draw my smiley face, and it's hidden there, but you get rid of a layer with the eyeball, but you don't permanently get rid of it. You just hide it. And you can see what things look like with or without something that you want to add or take away. And you can kind of just test the water of what you want to change. Now, this right here, you see these three squares here. This is the history tool here. And you can see all the changes that I've made. And you can just click on them to go back to wherever you were. This will keep track of everything that I've done. All the eraser marks, etc. Layer visibility, new layer, etc. So if you delete something and you don't want to delete it, you can go right back to here. Or if you make a mark and you don't want to erase it, or if it's too complicated to erase it, then you can just go into history and you can undo it. So I'll hide that for now. Next, we have the eyedropper. And the eyedropper is a tool that you can see right here. And this will take color from anything that you point at, and it will add it to here. So let's say I go over here in this landscape, and I want to take this blue right here, this dark blue. I can click that. You'll see the color show up there in that semicircle. I can go back over here, and with the brush tool, go to my layer here, I can start painting with that color. It's a pretty simple tool to use. You just click on what you want, and then you can paint with it. Now, to talk a little bit more about color, Photoshop has pretty much any color you can possibly think of or use. And generally, you'll work with this type of interface here, where you can select the hue of your color along this slider, the hue being which general color you're looking for. So if I want, let's say, a nice blue, I'll go about right here. And with this is the darkness and the saturation. Darkness being dark, going all the way to the bottom is dark, going all the way to the top is as light as it'll go. And then saturation goes from left to right. So no saturation to maximal saturation. If you go all the way down here, you're gonna have completely desaturated colors. So this is where white and grays go. And no matter which hue you do, it will always be that same gray, black, or white. But if you go all the way over here, you'll have completely saturated colors. This will be as bright and saturated as possible. This would be, I mean, this whole thing down here is black. No matter what, black is black is black. No matter how dark, no matter how saturated it is, black is always black. Okay, let's do, how about this weird lime green. All right, and I can paint with that. Cool. So, any questions, Aiden, before I continue, since you're the only one here?
No, not really.
No? Okay. Next up is going to be the shape tool. And this, as you can imagine, is what you can use to create shapes. It's also called the polygon tool, I guess is the correct term. Rectangle, whatever shape it is, rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse tool, triangle, polygon, or line, they all function exactly the same. They just create different shapes, and you can even make some crazy custom shapes with this. But we'll start with the rectangle tool. Create a new layer, hide this, and I'm going to choose what color I want the fill to be, so what's inside the square that I'm going to make, and the stroke is going to be the border of it. So if I want to just do, let's say, a black border, I'll make it, let's say 10 pixels. I will then just click where I want to start making it, and then I will drag to wherever I want it to be. And boom, we have our square, a rectangle rather. Now you can do different types of, you can do a perfect square by holding the shift key when you do this. So this is without the shift key, this is with the shift key, and it will auto lock to doing a square no matter what you do. And there we have it, a perfect square. With that, you can also take that circle in the corner there, and as you see, I'm changing the roundedness of the corners, and it will change. Now, we can also do a circle, the ellipse tool. And this one, just like the square, we can hold the shift key, and that will automatically do a perfect circle for us. Okay. Now, one thing that there is a similar, well, actually, let's take a look at the custom shape tool, and you can see some of the crazy shapes that you got here. Hopefully you can see that there. You can make a tree. I don't know why you'd want to necessarily do that. Maybe you've got a background, but it will create a tree for you, perfectly formed tree. Maybe you got a project, you want to paint some fake trees into the background. It's got that right there in there for you. All sorts of trees. It's got some wild animals, got some boats, it seems, and some flowers. I don't typically use any of these tools, but that doesn't mean I'll never use them, or that you couldn't find a good reason for. Maybe you want to make some kind of wildlife video, or not video, photo, and you got all the trees and foliage and some of the animals that you're going to need to do it right built into the tool itself. I'll get rid of that tree, and I'll hide this so we can start another layer, and we'll talk about the type tool. Type tool as it probably is self-explanatory, lets you type things. And as you can see, it's defaulted to white, so you can't see it here. So I will change that. Hello. Hello. Now, the type tool has access to every single font that you could find within Adobe, and they have a lot, and then you can look up even more if you want to get something just right for whatever project you're working on. You could have type that's like handwritten almost. You could have some chalk looking type. You could have some standard Times New Roman, you name it. It's in Photoshop. Now, with that, you also have access to italics, bold italics, and then depending on the font, there's actually a couple more options that you could have that are usually specific to exactly what type you're working with. Here we can change the size, make it real small, make it much bigger, and you can drag along these T's here to make it even bigger. And with that, we'll talk about the move tool, which is exactly what it sounds like. You move things around with it. So the keyboard shortcut for that is V, and you can just grab things and move them around. You can also go to like the corner or the edge of something, and you can change the size of it, as you can see. And that will actually change the font size over here as well when you use the type tool to do that. The move tool, as you've seen, I can move things around, is a very powerful tool that lets you move all sorts of things around. So if you drop a picture into here, you can move that around. If you've got your ellipse in the back here, I can move that around. Anything you add into Photoshop, you can generally move around. You can even move brush strokes around. It'll basically move the whole layer as one when you do that. Now, related to the move tool is the transform tool. And this will allow you to do things like rotate, or for instance, flip things horizontal or vertical. And this one's interesting, skew. So I can warp it like this. And pretty much you can just it's very similar to the move tool, and I don't think it'll even change up here when you use it. You can access it by hitting Command T. And as you see, it changed a little bit, gave me a few more options to work with. The box around here expanded, and it gives you access to these right-click things. But if I were to do that normally, if I was just going to right-click with just the move tool, it wouldn't give me those options. So as we move on to another tool, the Marquee Tool. This tool is a selection tool. So if you want to select an area within your project, this is one of the tools you can use. And it's right here. This is the rectangular Marquee Tool. We also have the elliptical Marquee Tool, single row and single column. These work very similarly to the shape tool, but instead of creating a shape, you are selecting an area in that shape. So similar to the rectangular shape tool, you can use the shift key to make it a perfect square, or you can just make your own rectangular shape. And as you can see, it also shows you the exact width and height of pixels. So you can, by freehand, create a perfect square, although it'll do it for you. So there's no real need. But what the Marquee tool does is you can see this I'll zoom in a little. You can see that I've selected this area right here, and the scissor tool, the scissor hands appear. There we go. And I'm now able to just cut that right out. So the Marquee tool allows you to select specific spots, specific shapes, a circle, a square, whatever you want of something that's on your screen, and you can just cut it and move it wherever you like as if it were its own shape. Okay. So I'll deselect that, and I'll just show you the elliptical marquee just to show you. Now, if I don't have
an
any
example of when you'd want to use a tool like that.
Okay, I'll show you. Let me. I'll show you right now. Just have to find the image I was using for that. Where is it? Of course, I can't find it now. No.
That's all right. You can just explain it.
All right. So say you had like the moon, and you wanted to take the moon out of an image and put it into another one. You could just use the Marquee tool to circle it perfectly, and then copy it, and then drag it into your or delete everything around it. Or you could, for instance, just move it into your next image, the image that you're working on. So I have a couple images going on right here. And I'll actually get to that later. I'm going to show everybody how to generally turn something like this into this. And what I did is I used the Marquee tool to take this planet out of the image that it was in before and put it into the background. But I'll get to that afterwards. I hope that's not too vague for you as an answer. But there's a couple of tools that are exactly like this, not exactly, but function similarly. They'll allow you to select certain areas, and you can, when you do your selection, you can either delete or you can copy it with Command C, and then with Command V, paste it somewhere else. And just make copies and copies and copies. Another type of selection tool is the lasso tool. And this one is for imperfect shapes. So if lasso tools, you just make a shape and that will be your selection. So say I wanted to just circle all this right here. The shape tool is not really going to get you a fine enough, a shape that's good enough to really encompass this. You got to kind of make your own. You can use that to maybe take a person out of an image or circle something that you want that's a little more difficult to select and copy it that way, move it that way, or remove it. Another similar tool to that would be the magnetic lasso, which would be, it'll just magnetically apply itself to an area as you just generally move your mouse over it. And sometimes you got to click a point to make it select. As you see, it's making points as I go. And if I wanted to just call it there, I can just double click and I can take that right out of the image. There's actually several ways to do selections in Photoshop. Another one of them is the Magic Wand tool. And the Magic Wand tool will select everything that looks more or less the same color or luminance of what you click on. So if I click on, let me just create some more contrasting things here. Okay, so the Magic Wand tool, if I wanted to select just this green here, it will select all that green, everything that even remotely looks like it, as best it can. It has a tolerance level of what it's willing to allow compared to the pixel that you clicked on. So if I click here, it's going to select all the green, and then also, as you can see, the marching ants kind of select even more than I probably want it to select. It selects some of the white, some of the black here. And while I'm zoomed in here, you can see that each individual pixel of the raster image. So Magic Wand tool, you can do things where it'll do everything that's connected to where you clicked in terms of color, or you can turn off contiguous and it will select everything that looks more or less like the pixel you clicked within the image. So it's now selected these two different green brush strokes, even though they are not connected. Similarly to that is the quick selection tool. And this one will select, it'll scan the area you're moving your mouse within with the tool, and it will select everything in that area that looks more or less like what you've clicked on. So it'll continually reevaluate what you're selecting. And that's pretty good for things like down here. I'll just deselect everything. That's pretty good for things like this where it's not smooth. So I'm going to want to, and now it's actually selecting more than I want. That's okay. We're going to have a better example of that after this. So I could use that to say I want to remove this sky because I want to put a different background in. I can click on that. And since the contrast between the sky and the mountain here is good, I can remove it or select it very easily so that I can remove it. And I'm going to use a mask to remove the background without doing what's called a destructive edit. And I mentioned that earlier, but a destructive edit is something that you do that permanently alters the image. So if I were to just hit delete, and my computer doesn't freeze up, it would remove the background there, and you'd see the canvas behind it. It doesn't show you a white background. This square pattern here is an indication that there's nothing there. So that would be a destructive edit. I don't necessarily want to do that. I like to leave the image intact as best as possible. Just in case I want to make a change, I don't have to bring in a new image of the same thing just to bring back whatever I lost. So what I would do is I would click select and mask. And this is going to get a little bit more complicated, but it's showing me exactly what it is I selected. And I'm going to output that as a layer mask. And I actually need to invert this because now it's it has removed what I wanted to keep. So a simple fix for that, I don't know how clear it is to see on your screen there, but this right here is what our mask is. And a mask is defined in black and white. Black removes and white reveals. So the white here, as you might be able to see, is the selection that I had picked. Whereas the ground and everything like that, that is in black. And what I can do is I can go and I can invert that mask, and I invert the selection with it because I've changed what was black into white and what was white into black. And now I have my my selection here without destroying the image. So I can take that away and I have the image back, no problem. Okay, what I wanted to do was show you how to take this and make something generally like this using the tools that I had kind of gone over. Just to give you an example of the power of Photoshop. Everything you see here is built with a layer. So right there, there is Mars. And I used what I just showed you, a selection to make that. I have clouds here that I used the selection tool to make and refine that. There's our mountain range there, and you can see kind of all the components that I use to create the image here. Okay. Oops. Okay, so this is the Mars image that I was talking about earlier. This is where I would use the elliptical marquee. And what I would do is I'd go to kind of, you'd want to be able to use a perfect circle here. And you're going to use a number of keyboard shortcuts here. Right now, I'm going to use Shift to make it a perfect circle. But as you can see, it's not lined up perfectly on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command, excuse me, the space bar. I'm going to use Shift and the space bar, holding them down at the same time, and that will allow me to move where my selection is without ruining anything with it. So I'll get it there, right about, that looks just about center to me. I'll let go of the space bar, and that's not a perfect selection for me. So what I'm going to do, I'll start over. We'll go from here. I'm going to hold the Option key, and that's going to center it on where I started. And then I'm going to move until I get it just about right. Good. That looks pretty good to me. And I could just copy this, go back to our first layer here. I could just paste that in, and I'm gonna move this below our landscape here so that it appears behind it. Shrink it down a little bit. And then I'm gonna try and line it up so that the shadow sort of syncs up with the shadows cast on the mountain here, so that we have a general direction of where the sun is coming from. There we go. And from here, I'm going to take the cloud layer. All right, so I've got my clouds here. As you can imagine, no shape layer or magic wand, oops, is really going to get me exactly what I want. It can do okay, but when you look a little closer, it's leaving out, it's just going to come out very rough. So what I'm going to do, For this, I'm going to use the quick selection tool. And I can use the option key to paint away things I don't want. And I'm just going to select generally what I want. Should be the clouds. And that would give us this nice cloud background here. You want to be able to see this, the planet behind it. Oh, select a little too much there. I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can get some more fine movements in there. And now it's selected the whole thing, so that's too much. Oops. All right, I'm just going to make it a little easier for myself. I'm going to select the clouds. And this is, I'm using the quick selection tool. Sort of paint in everything that I want. And as you can see, where it starts to get all sort of gray, desaturated colors in the sky, and the color starts to kind of match the clouds, it's going to have a harder time trying to figure out what exactly it is I want to select. But generally, it'll do a pretty good job. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to want to do now is I'm going to want to create a mask so that I only get the clouds here. And you're going to see when I create this mask that it doesn't look very good. You can see that it's, I can't see my mouse. Sorry. Make it a little bigger so I can see. There we go. Okay. And as we sort of zoom in here, it's kind of rough. You can see the blue of the sky. It doesn't really look very good. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to tell Photoshop how much of an, I want to refine the edge within Photoshop. So edge detection here is a really powerful tool. It's going to go to the line that it has drawn around what I've selected, and it's going to branch out a certain amount of pixels in either direction to sort of figure out where I might have done better, so to speak. It's going to give me a better, as I kind of play with this, you can kind of see the clouds start to look a little more fluffy, but if I go too far, it starts giving me blue. So I got to be very careful with it. And I can zoom in and I can actually make changes in here as well. I can sort of just start removing, but that doesn't look too pretty now, does it? You can sort of just play with your settings until you get it as good as you're gonna probably get it. That looks good enough for me. I don't want to spend too much time doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to output this as a layer mask. And now we have our clouds here. I'm going to copy our clouds. I'm going to duplicate this layer. And I'm going to put it in our landscape. And I go over here, and here it is in the back here. I don't like the way that it is positioned, so I'm going to change that up. And I'd like the Mars photo in the back here to kind of be hidden more by this than these, because you're kind of missing too much of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the transform tool, and then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to get it in a position that looks just good enough. Okay. And now from here, I'm going to want to probably get rid of some of the blue that you still see left over here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use what's called the Hue and Saturation tool, which can be found here in Adjustments, in Image, Adjustments. I'll go to Hue and Saturation. And I kind of want to make everything more brown, kind of blend in with this dusty planet look that we've got going on. So I'm going to change the hue, and the hue will change. We'll change that to sort of be a brownish color, and sort of desaturate that a little bit. Good. Okay. And now we're going to want to make a sky here. We're going to use what's called the gradient tool. The gradient tool is right here. I already have this made up right here, but we can remake it. So on this planet, I want it to kind of be a brownish kind of sky, very dusty, kind of gross looking. And with the gradient tool, I need to create a new layer. I want this to be behind the clouds. And there it is. Okay. And I want to draw downwards. And now we kind of have, as you can see, we kind of lost the Mars there. So I'm going to put that in front of it. And I'm going to use what's a little bit more advanced, but right here we have blending modes. I want this to look like, I want the Mars in the background to look more like something you'd see if you were looking on the ground. You know how like if you look through a lot of air through the sky, things tend to start being a little, you lose some of the color in the sky. So I'm going to use what's called screen. And that's going to make it a little too light. So I'm actually going to bring that back to normal. I'm going to use the screen on there. That makes it a little bit easier. And now that looks a little too light, so I'm going to change the contrast using levels. In the same place that we found hue and saturation, we'll find levels. Levels will change the darkness. You can start making that color look a little better. And we work with the shadows here, the highlights here, and the midtones here. You can kind of finesse that in a way. Make the darks look dark. There we go. Okay. Now it's not a perfect one-for-one of this, but you can kind of see what we're getting at here. On this one, I believe I made a few extra changes. I made it a little bit of a blur to make it look a little bit nicer, cleaner. before I continue, does anybody have any questions? No? All right, cool. Hi, Sherry. I see you there now. Welcome. Okay. All right, so what else do I have? So that's just a general quick edit. If I wanted to really refine it, make it more look like this, this probably took me about 2 hours to really refine, and I don't think we have that sort of time. But you can see I got the sky color a little bit better. I changed the color here to look a little bit more like Mars and make Mars look a little bit better in the background there. The clouds are a little bit better trimmed. And then I added these crazy guys here, doing burnouts out here in the desert.
Sean, when you're refining stuff for that long, what exactly are you refining? Like what aspects?
So I'm trying to refine the edge here to make it look softer, more cloud-like. I'm trying to get the detail of the cloud without taking too much of the sky or anything else around it. See how we kind of have nice, the like misty part of the cloud isn't lost. It looks nice and like it belongs there.
Gotcha.
Sean,
Yes,
so I know I missed the beginning and I apologize for that.
no problem.
But was this a blank, this was a blank slate that you started with? So you started, you didn't take an existing picture and start adding to it. You took a blank canvas, for lack of a better.
Yeah, I took a few images that I had and I combined them.
Okay. So could you do this on an image, like if I have an image that I want to add something to or refine a little bit, do I have to have the original? Is it something that has to come from my camera, you know, my phone, or can I put it in to make a PDF of it? Actually, would I be able to do that with a PDF?
A PDF,
Does it
I
have to be a
think so.
PNG?
Yeah,
Okay.
PNG works, JPEG works. Photoshop can even work with GIFs, although it'd be a little bit more complicated, and I'm not as experienced with working with things like that.
Okay.
But generally, a PNG or a JPEG work really well. But any image file like a TIFF or almost anything, Photoshop can accommodate. So it should be able to work with a PDF. I've just not personally used PDFs for it. But if you have the original photo, that works even better because you have it in its perfect regular resolution as it was taken by the camera. And that's generally always the best way to work with it. But if you don't have access to that, that's okay. Like you can still make it work.
Okay.
Like this here was a landscape that I had gotten online, and as well as the picture of Mars and some clouds. And I just masked out the areas that I don't want. I cut out the areas I don't want to reveal just the areas that I do want.
Okay. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a very powerful tool, as we can see. I just kind of wanted to maybe answer any questions that anybody had. We have probably about 10 or so more minutes. There's a couple things I could go over.
Can you make something transparent in Photoshop?
Yes, you can. That is called opacity. So say I didn't want to, say for some reason I wanted to make Mars sort of fade away. I can go over here to the layer with the Mars layer selected. I'll even name that Mars just to be a little more clear. And I'll go to the opacity here, and you can either click on it and use the scale. You can type into right here, or you can just drag right here, and I can fade that right out, and you can see right through it. I'll make it a little bit easier. I'll show you here. I'll make the landscape sort of fade so you can really see what I'm talking about. That is called opacity. Now, Photoshop also has a really powerful program within itself. So a program within a program, Camera Raw. Just don't feel like searching for where it is. There it is, filter, Camera Raw. And this is what you would use to do some finer color changes. So you could pop in a photo and say it looked a little too warm or a little too cool for you. You change the temperature. Warm being how sort of orange, like orange or red, hot colors. Cold being cool colors like blue, purple. You can adjust with that. You can also, if something looks a little too green or magenta to you, you can change that tint there. That's another common, these are two common color changes that you would make in an image. You can also, yes.
Can you adjust only the sky if you wanted to, or is that a little bit more involved?
I changed the sky just simply because that was just the easiest thing to show.
Okay.
But I could, for example, I could come in here and if I wanted to, say, get rid of the ground here where it's all bright. And if I wanted to put lava, I don't have an image of lava on hand, but if I wanted to, I could come in here with my quick selection tool and start selecting this really bright part of the ground. And you can see these, the lines here. I believe they call that the marching ants. And I could, I'll just, I wouldn't normally do this, but I could just delete that right there and get rid of it. And maybe you want to put like water in there, like a swimming pool or something
Yeah.
silly like that. You could do that just like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And in the future, if anybody would like some more hands-on lessons, or if they have an image they want to try in Photoshop, I can help you work through that. And it'd be a lot easier to see what you want to work on and tell you exactly how you would go about changing things right here in the studio. So
Great.
yeah. So
Thank
For
you.
those that aren't aware, Tech and Treats is our monthly monthly kind of, we call it our 50,000 foot overview of something. It's more, we use it as an introductory purpose for a piece of software or a piece of equipment we have. So someone kind of has a little bit of knowledge before they come in and, you know, do a full hands-on training with a member of the staff. So, you know,
That's great.
this is so we have, so Sean, thank you very much for doing this.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
Greatly appreciate it. And just for those that are here live or those watching later on, if you have any questions about, you know, Photoshop or want to come in and learn how to use it, you know, feel free to reach out to Sean about this. So that's pretty much it. Just a reminder that excuse me, next month's Tech and Treats will take place Tuesday, February 23rd on Open Broadcast Software. Pretty excited on that one as well. And I think that's pretty much it. So we want to thank everybody for coming out this evening, and we will see you next time.